It's that time of the week again. Every boy and girl rejoice. It's Friday. And you know what that means?
That means a tier list Friday, everybody. And today we're talking about range DPS in raids. And it has been a while. And this is more difficult to do than the Mythic Plus because everybody's like the cheeses, man. And the power infusions.
There's a lot of cheese. There's a lot of omelette du fromage in these logs and this data. But hey, we're going to take it as it is. And we're going to rank them with the data that we have. Okay, because there's not like any other place we can look for it. And we try to make this as objective as possible to see, based on every goddamn log and, you know, performance on each and every spec. So
how they do is like how everybody is performing in the raid with what tools we have right now. So I don't want to hear but he pulled and everybody used their cooldowns for those 20 power infusions that the person got. Like, oh yeah, fair enough. But you know, we're never going to be able to rule those out. So at the very least, let's see what like the top of the top, the creme de la creme, if you have all the stars aligned, what your spec can do. Yeah,
but you know what your spec can do even better? Check out the Warcraft Logs app.
Especially if you want to see your performance, see your guild's performance, because you have rankings for your character and for your guild as well. Not to mention that with the Warcraft Logs app that runs separately and also has an in-game UI, you can log on the fly. And also if you are creating a group where people need to apply for a raid or a dungeon, you can actually go for each individual person that is applying and you can check their log. You can see if they've cleared that boss before, what pars they got, or that dungeon as well, what the highest key is that they've done, and so on and so forth. So it's a good metric to do, and inside the game you don't need to do any external bullshit.
Yeah, that's the main quality of life for it. Not to mention the fact that it helps you always check your logs and improve yourself based on, you know, comparing logs with other players and stuff. So, you know, if there's one way to track your, I would say, progress within a game like World of Warcraft, Warcraft Logs app is the go-to. So go into the description, click on it, download it, and start using it because it will help you a lot. We use it all the time. It's amazing. Thank you, Warcraft Logs.
Thanks so much.
And now, for the
back to regular schedule.
Oh boy, we're gonna start off with Affliction, man.
Okay.
Poor Affliction. I mean, let's face it, man. Affliction did do good in Shadowlands. Overall, it was a decent spec. It's a decent spec right now as well. Now, if we're gonna measure Affliction with the other two Warlock specs, there's really no competition over there, and this is mainly why we're gonna rank Affliction a little bit lower.
Yeah, it's all the way down into C tier, and I do have to preface by saying that Affliction, in the core essence of the spec, it has always been the ideal Warlock raiding spec, which is probably why in pretty much all the raids world first, except this one maybe, it has been stacked and used so much because its kit just really works with the raid. It just so happens that the tier set and the system that we have right now don't bump it up as much as they do with Destro and Demonology. So that's kind of why the discrepancy between Affliction and most other specs that you will see on the list is so high.
This is the honest truth. That doesn't mean that if you're a heroic rating, even a mythic rating, you're not going to do well on Affliction. It's just at the top of the top, people are going to choose Destruction and Demonology for obvious reasons, which we'll get to. Next on the list, a little bit, I would say, better performing spec. Arcane Mages, which do have some competition as well within their class. This is the trouble with pure DPS specs, pure DPS classes, because they're always going to be the other two specs. They're going to be direct competition, and Arcane Mage falls directly into that.
Kind of happens when it's going to be rankings, because when it's about rankings, like if it's 1% better, then it's better. And Arcane Mage still has its burst.
Still good burst as well. Yeah, still good burst. I mean, it has its consistency, really good AoE as well. It's just that in terms of like the pure performance and numbers, when you compare burst and AoE and cleave, there's obviously a little bit more tuning to be made when compared to the other mage specs. Now, this is the thing. If you would have had Arcane Mages having, I would say, 10% more numbers than the other two, a lot more would be playing that, and you would see Arcane Mages a lot more higher in the rankings. But for now, I would say a respectable B tier is fair enough for Arcane Mages. Yeah, it's gonna get there at some point. I have faith in it. Okay.
It's B tier. It's kind of like average, bell curve, top of the bell curve. You know that.
This is mythic. Okay, so we're looking at mythic.
Mythic
okay,
and high percentiles,
like
by the way.
Super
like
high.
95 percentiles higher. Like people who know their shit.
Okay, now BM hunters, the beast mastery hunters. I think this is probably the worst time for them on like the top of the top. Not saying that beast masters are bad or by any capacity. Like you can do very well if you master the spec. However, once again,
it's same argument as Affliction. Although if I recall, I don't remember exactly. We'll probably have it on screen when we start to do the tier list. Looking into the raid for range, we probably rank Beastmaster pretty high because its tier set promotes single target damage, which I mean it's still really good. It's just that a lot of like the key fights, the ones that give you big ass deeps, will be pure AOE. And unfortunately, Beastmaster isn't really designed this patch to take advantage of large AoE fights. So right now, Beastmaster is kind of like C tier behind Affliction.
I mean, it's not D tier. It's
I've looked at it. I really thought about it. It's like, listen, man, I don't think we can put it into D tier because at least Beast Mastery is clearing Mythic Jailer. So Beast Mastery, unlike other specs in the game, is clearing Mythic Jailer, which is why prompted me to not put into D tier. So even in C tier, there's the specs I've down to the Jailer, and it's good. It's
again, competition with marksman and survival on specific fights not gonna help out, but yeah, still C tier. Now, the chicken wings are here. If you like them spicy, if you like them with some curry, or just plain all wicked, it's the Boomkins. The Boomkins have seen a fall in popularity and performance, I would say, and I think the fall in popularity is to their performance. Not to say that Boomkins are bad. You can always use a lot of Boomkins on specific fights, which are very great. Their burst is still there, although they have fallen when compared to other specs. Now, in terms of like the rankings, let's say between Affliction and Boomkin, it's not that different, but I would say Boomkin will take the face of...
Boomkin is actually a little bit better. I hesitated about putting Boomkin into B tier or C tier, but again, there was a substantial difference between Arcane and Boomkin, which was surprising because, you know...
Well, they're both Arcane-oriented motherfuckers.
I was about to say, right?
But yeah, was surprised too. Arcane...
One is a fat chicken.
I'm not going to go into that space again.
Khadgar's cooler, I'm just
Now, there's no denial. I mean, Boomkin has its charm or whatever. People who play it absolutely love it.
I mean, we have a Boomkin in our raid, and he does really good damage. Two Boomkins?
Two something. Well, it depends on when we need them on rest or not.
Going through the phases, if you need like a burst phase, if you need cooldowns and like, okay, we need to
you're gonna see
really good. Boomkin is still really good for that. Hence why it's still kind of like in the relevancy of the tier set. It's not completely D tier.
Yeah, it's fine. Once again, this is another situation where if the Boomkins have been great, I would say for the whole majority of Shadowlands. Okay, rating and Mythic Plus.
Yeah.
I think at this point it's only fair to have them not super bad, but you know, in a spot where they will allow other specs to shine more.
Precisely.
Which brings me to the Demonstruction.
Demonology.
All right.
Damn,
the
man.
Demolution.
All right. This was
Demolition.
Although not entirely surprising, was slightly surprising. It's all the way into S tier, baby.
Boom, baby.
Warlock is doing really well, and obviously we know why as well. But sticking to Demonology, its single target is out of this world. Probably the highest single target in the game right now.
I think so.
Based on how its skits
Is there any cheese involved, Flame? I'm wondering.
I'm sure there's ways to take advantage of the single target. However, I don't think it's the same as it was in Season 1. If you remember, when you had the HP stack.
Shit,
bullshit, like warriors popping rallying cries.
I remember.
At the beginning of the pools, like who needs rallying cries 5 seconds into the pool?
Yeah, because without that, you wouldn't see Demonology. But listen,
it's Demonology
is exactly. It's a very cool spec, very underperforming spec for the longest time, as Flame mentioned, and by this time around, 9.2, we've seen such an uprising for Demo Warlocks in all aspects of the game. It's just amazing, and once again, it's one of those specs that actually deserves to be there on S tier. I would say, hey, well deserved. Okay, rejoice.
About time.
Rejoice.
You enjoy Demos.
Now, the brother from the same mother from Demo Warlock, which is Destruction Warlock, it's sort of like in a similar place. You remember how bad Destro Warlock was?
Oh my god, it was so terrible. It was like all the way into D tier, and Destro Warlock is the reason why this tier list has been made particularly difficult because to properly showcase the strength of this warlock, we needed an S+ tier. But since we don't have an S+ tier, and I didn't want to put specs into D tier, Destruction is going into S tier, but it is number 1, and it is by a substantial margin. I would say there's a whole tier difference between Destro and Demo and the rest, but they'll just give you too many rows.
Too many rankings, too many. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? As Flame mentioned at the beginning, the most important fights do involve a lot of AoE and cleave, and Destruction Warlock is no goddamn joke. I mean, as easy it is to pull off, its numbers are through the roof. And I wouldn't like neglect the single target either. It's still pretty good. It's still pretty good. I mean, okay, it maybe you will have more prowess in a Demo Warlock or maybe a Fire Mage or something. But the fact that for the most important fights you will have this situation where you need to have big ass AoE and cleave, man, Destruction Warlock will just take the cake, hands down, no competition.
Take the cake and eat it too, man.
Yeah, this is the thing. Again, another spec that was for the majority of time in D tier in all aspects of the game. Now top echelon, and I kind of like that whole idea. It's hard to maintain all specs into S tier, that's for sure. Moving along to, I would say, one of the most consistent specs throughout the expansion, Elemental Shaman.
You say that, and even though putting it into the tier that it's going to be in will look like similar what we had before, based on the fact that Destro and Demo are so stupid, makes Elemental's position in the rankings a lot more impressive because it's doing way better. Actually, this has been the biggest surprise for me doing the research for this tier list because I did not expect Elemental to be that good. It's actually in the A tier, and it's very high above everybody else. I mean, if you say like Elemental is the 3rd best range DPS specs, it doesn't really say much. It's kind of always been that way. Yeah. But when you see it's like, man, it's just below Demonology, you're like, wait a minute, but Demonology is stupid. Elemental is, let's say, the mannered meta spec, right? With a little bit of comments, a little bit of style,
a little bit of consciousness. Yeah, I get it now. But my point was, you never really saw in any tier Elemental Shamans really fall below B tier. I mean, it was always between B and A, sometimes S, and this is why I was saying it's one of the most consistent specs throughout this expansion. I don't know if BFA treated them any different in that capacity. I think there was more S tier there, but granted, it is not an easy spec to pull off and to play properly. So it's that type of situation where the effort is kind of compensated by the reward if you play it right. Definitely worthy of an A tier. Next up on the list, Le Fire Mage.
Fire Mage, which kind of has seen a resurgence in the last couple of weeks. Yes. Been looking at Warcraft logs for rankings for both dungeons and raids, but now in raids, Fire Mage is it's A tier. It's A tier. I mean, it's behind Elemental, surely, but I think it's still the King Mage spec in single target.
Well, for sure, and also AoE is super good. You have to remember, it still plays on its most valuable component, which is access to burst really fast, similar to sub rogues. Due to kindling and all of that. Yeah, single target is great, but you saw, great from our guild, like in the AoE phases. There's no denial there. They're very, very good. I know at the beginning of the season, especially at the beginning of Progress, we didn't see him ranking
I think Fire was really low.
Was kind of low, yeah, at the beginning. Frost was a lot more prominent back then. But this is a situation where people kind of like are fully decked out now, and it's you can talk about once again cheeses over there, PIs and all of that, inflations of PIs or whatever. But that being said, Fire Mage was always to be expected to do really, really good, and by no surprise, it's A tier. I mean, it could have been S tier, but Destro and Demo are so bonkers right now, especially Destro, there's really no chance. Now, next up on the list, the brother from the same mother, once again, Frost Mage, which
it's a little bit lower compared to Fire. I mean, even though it has received some bumps when it comes to single target, because if you probably have looked in the past years, when it comes to raiding, Frost hasn't really performed at the upper echelons, haven't really performed as well as other specs, not to mention the other mage specs, but right now it's actually ahead of Arcane, which is pretty cool.
This is very, very interesting to me because due to the fact that a lot of the important fights are AoE and cleave, I was expecting Frost to be a lot more in there. However, after we had the chat with OK Mage on the MO Cast, which you can check out as well, I did understand something that I never really thought about because I haven't played a range DPS in a long time. The fact that there's a lot of punishing movement stuff for Frost Mages. This really gimps their capacity to maintain their consistent damage all throughout. And this is not the same to be said for, I would say, the Destro Warlocks, because they do their Rain of Fire all the time. They don't need that super positioning.
That's on AoE.
AoE. This is strictly AoE and Cleave.
I mean,
and Fire Mage also.
That's the difference between the S tiers that we have this time around, because Destro and specifically Demo are very reliant on hard casting, especially in single target, but they do so much more damage that even though they might be punished maybe more or less in a similar way, because remember, Warlocks don't have Blink, it doesn't matter because the damage is just so stupid.
Crazy. Yeah, this is the thing, that the punishment is not comparable, and this is why my was surprised. My surprised feeling towards Frost Mages. I was expecting them to do a lot better, especially in AoE and Cleave. Nevertheless, moving on to Marksmanship Hunters, again another spec that has been consistently strong throughout the expansion.
Consistently nice, man. Like looking at how Marksman is performing, it's very interesting. It's all the way up to 8 tier right now. Is doing better than Fire Mage, which hasn't happened in a while. I think I don't know if better than a Mage spec, let's say, hasn't happened since
it was kind of there
since season 1.
Yeah, I mean, it was there with them. The thing about Marksman is, I don't know, the changes and the tuning brought to them in Shadowlands, and now to the present day with the double Legos and tier set, just like completes, I would say, a almost all-rounded DPS spec that can do very well in any capacity. It's a lot more punishing than BM. That's in one regard, but this is the thing, right? If a spec is rewarded for being a little bit more aware, and I would dare say skillful, then the numbers should reflect that. And Marksman is one of those specs. I mean, you can see it on A tier, but if you never played Marksman and you're expecting to be A tier, you're gonna have a couple of bumps along the road, let's say. That's what I'm saying. If you want to start off and maybe try out BM is gonna do absolutely fine for you. Then you're gonna move on to Marksman and get acquainted with it. It is an upgrade, but once you put in the effort and you master it,
dude,
you're gonna have a lot more performance.
Marksman can do a lot of things, and it works really well with the AoE, considering you have Volley, which was maybe I keep saying this is one of the best additions to Marksman. This expansion, not to mention the tier set, giving you trick shot even on 2 targets, which is cool.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It rounded up the spec. It just feels like almost perfect. Dare I say it?
Perfectissimo.
Okay, last on the list, Le Shadow Priest. Another very well-performing spec. I think this has rised a bit from our last tier list.
I need to ask you, sir, why would you think Shadow Priest is... Okay, first of all, Shadow Priest is in A tier.
Let's put it up there.
Just behind Fire Mage. Need I remind you, not very far behind Fire Mage, but because we know it's an A tier, why do you think that is, sir?
Well, I can think of a couple of ideas. I know Shadow Priest does really, very good single target damage. I am questioning the AoE though. How is the AoE?
The AoE is good, and this was a trap question, sir, and you have succeeded in not being baited, because I thought you would say Power Infusion, and it's not Power Infusion. I've looked also at the damage output of Shadow Priest, and it is stupid.
It's great. I knew they had really great single target. I knew, like, for the AoE and Cleave fights, there's a similar story for Mythic Plus. There's a lot of momentum and build-up to be done there, and management, and this was my only concern, right? But if they do compensate...
Easy, but
again, you can have the argument for that we had for the Frost Mage as well, because there is a lot of like punishment if you don't move correctly and you don't cast all the time. This is the thing where Shadow Priest can be punished maybe a little bit harder than even Frost Mages, and I'm talking about specifically AoE and Cleave fights. However, if the single target DPS is to compensate for that, like
I mean, I think it had received the biggest single target nerfs this batch out of all of the specs.
Even so, I think it's doing great. Not an easy spec once again to fully master, but as time showed, like when players just started playing Shadow from the start of the season and progressing, now you can see him like being full on out, mastering everything on it, timings, cooldowns, movement, all of that, paired up with the double Legos and tier set. Super great performance. And conclusion, this is a beautiful picture.
It's pretty good. So we've done like a kind of a different approach in the last couple of tier lists, where we've looked at the D tier and thought about what would people think about a D tier spec, and most people, when they think about D tier, is unplayable, and no spec is unplayable, like we mentioned before. And I do want to point out one specific thing that is something that I really endorse is BM has to be one of the least punishable specs in the game, period, not just ranged. And you have specs that can be severely punished, like this show and the demo. Let's say Demonology,
and Frost,
a little bit
Shadow.
more. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that if you can fight through the disadvantages, you can perform better, right? So if you have like a more accessible spec, it can do really good all the time. It's, let's say, easier to master than other specs. Then it shouldn't do more damage than the specs that are more difficult. And you have specs like Demonology, like Shadow Priest, like Fire Mage, like Elemental, that are not particularly easy to pull off, or they can be incredibly punished, and yet they're doing way more.
Take this with a grain of salt, guys. Again, the logs are with a lot of cheese into them, so there's not 100% representative of what could be done. However, this is like the top of the top, 95 percentile plus mythic rating. We always say this: whatever spec you enjoy playing, that's the spec that will do the greatest on. Just play it, regardless if it's normal, heroic, or mythic. LFR, if that's your jam, that doesn't care. If you love the spec, master it, you're gonna be on the top of the DPS charts, no problemo. And we'd like to thank the Patreons for their continuous support. Obviously, these videos would not be made available without them. And as always, thank you so much, Warcraft Logs, for sponsoring the video. Make sure to check out the link in the description. Download the
better
app.
Players.
Yeah, man, it's very helpful. We use it like for a long time. Like we used this since before it was a standalone app, right? We used the Warcraft Logs website and stuff. Now it's a lot more easier. So thank you, Warcraft Logs app. Thank you for watching the video.
Thank you.
Patreons for supporting the content.
Appreciate it.
Have a great weekend.
See ya.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.